At Memory Lane Publishing in Toronto's Markham Street Village, the antiques are comic books.
1960s essentials that are now completely obsolete. Today we will explore more than 60 things which were once commonplace items, like iron lungs, microfilm readers, blueprint machines, hay toilets, and card catalogs in the 1960s. Let's explore how they have faded into history. Encyclopedia sets. 70 years ago, encyclopedia sets were essential for learning. People relied on these heavy books to discover facts about the world. Today, smartphones give us instant access to all that information and more. Encyclopedia sets, once considered treasures, are now mostly forgotten. They became obsolete as digital technology made learning faster and easier, replacing the need to flip through pages with just a few taps on a screen. Phone books. Phone books were once needed for finding anyone's number. People flipped through these thick pages to call a friend or order a pizza. Now they're practically fossils. With smartphones, we just tap a name and boom, we're connected. Who needs a giant book when Google and contact lists do the job faster, right? Phone books went from household staples to doorstops in the blink of a digital eye. Carbon paper in an office. Carbon paper was the go-to for making copies of documents in offices. With a piece of paper sandwiched between two sheets, you could create duplicates instantly. But with photocopiers and printers, carbon paper has become a thing of the past. It went obsolete as technology made copying faster and cleaner.
Carbon paper was patented by the English inventor Ralph Wedgwood, a member of the prominent pottery-making family,
leaving behind a legacy of smudged hands and blue ink stains. Leaded gasoline, aka tetraethyl lead. Leaded gasoline was once the standard for fueling cars, providing the power needed for engines to run smoothly. But it was discovered to be harmful to health and the environment. Today, unleaded gasoline is the norm, and leaded gas is banned in most places. This fuel became obsolete as the world shifted to cleaner alternatives, making our air a bit easier to breathe. An answering service. Answering services were crucial for businesses and busy people who could always pick up the phone. Someone else would take your calls and messages for you. But with the invention of answering machines and later voicemail, these services became unnecessary. They went obsolete as technology allowed us to manage our calls and messages personally, no middleman needed. The Negro Motorist Green Book. The Negro Motorist Green Book was a vital guide for black travelers in the U.S., showing safe places to eat, sleep, and refuel. As civil rights advanced and discrimination laws changed, the need for such a guide diminished. It became obsolete as travel became safer and more inclusive, marking a painful but important chapter in history. Mimeograph machines. Mimeograph machines were once used in schools to make copies of worksheets and tests. Students would often catch a whiff of the alcohol-thinned ink.
To make this written communication easier and faster, many different machines have been developed. The simplest is the typewriter making carbon copies.
A smell many still remember. Today, photocopiers and printers have replaced mimeographs, making them obsolete. The once familiar scent and process are now just memories from the classroom. Payphones. Payphones were once found on every corner, essential for making calls when you were out and about. Now, with everyone carrying a cell phone, payphones are practically extinct. They became obsolete as mobile phones took over, leaving those once familiar booths as memory of a disconnected past. 1949 calendar. A 1949 calendar was essential for keeping track of days and appointments. Today, digital calendars on our phones and computers do the job better. The old paper calendars became obsolete as technology allowed us to manage our time more efficiently, turning them into charming pieces of nostalgia. Having 10 kids. In the past, large families were common, partly due to the fear of losing children to diseases like polio. Today, with vaccines and better health care, the need for large families as a safety net has disappeared. The fear of diseases like polio is nearly forgotten, making this once common practice obsolete. Travel agents. Travel agents were once essential for booking vacations, flights, and hotels. Today, online booking platforms have made it easy for anyone to plan a trip from their couch. Travel agents are now a rarity, with most people preferring to handle their travel plans themselves.
It's a lovely resort, good hotel, and between the three of you, you'll save at least... Is there someone else?
Leaving the profession to specialize in luxury or complex itineraries. Ashtrays in public places. Ashtrays used to be everywhere, in restaurants, offices, and even airplanes. As smoking bans spread and fewer people smoked, public ashtrays have all but disappeared. They became obsolete as society moved toward healthier lifestyles and stricter regulations on smoking. Bank passports. Bank passports were once fundamental for keeping track of your account balance. People diligently updated them after every transaction. Today, online banking makes passbooks unnecessary. Who needs a little book when you can check your balance on your phone? Passbooks became obsolete as digital banking took over, making them a nostalgic reminder of simpler times. Library card catalogs. Library card catalogs were once the key to finding books in a library. Rows of drawers filled with index cards helped readers locate exactly what they needed. Today, digital catalogs have replaced these physical systems, making the process faster and more efficient. The old card catalogs are now mostly museum pieces or repurposed furniture. Bomb shelters. During the Cold War, bomb shelters were built as a precaution against nuclear attacks. People stocked them with supplies, preparing for the worst. As the threat of global nuclear war receded, these shelters became obsolete.
Let me do a little pan around real quick. This has basically one big kitchen and living room.
Often converted into storage or simply abandoned. Vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes were once a crucial component in radios, televisions, and early computers. People knew how to test and replace them. With the advent of transistors and modern electronics, vacuum tubes became outdated. Today, they're mostly found in vintage equipment or high-end audio gear, but they are no longer a household necessity. Sears catalog. The Sears catalog was a retail giant, bringing everything from clothes to houses directly to consumers' doors. It was a shopping staple before malls and online shopping took over. As the retail landscape changed, the Sears catalog became obsolete, a relic of a time when mail-order shopping was revolutionary. Telegrams. Telegrams were the fastest way to send a message across long distances. They were used for important news and urgent communication. With the rise of telephones and later email, telegrams became unnecessary. They've been replaced by instant communication methods, turning telegrams into a historical curiosity. Rotary dial phones. Rotary dial phones were once the standard in homes and businesses. To make a call, you'd rotate the dial for each number. With push-button phones and smartphones taking over, rotary dials became obsolete. Today, they're more of a vintage decoration than a practical device.
With them. So according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 47% of Americans...
Antennas with adjustable rotary motors. Before cable and internet, TV reception often depended on antennas. Some even had motors to rotate the antenna for better signal. As cable TV and digital streaming became widespread, these antennas were no longer needed. They became obsolete, leaving behind memories of fiddling with knobs to get a clear picture. Camera film. Camera film was once necessary for capturing memories. You'd load a roll of film into your camera, take pictures, and then wait for them to be developed. Today, digital cameras and smartphones have made film nearly obsolete. With instant photos and no need for development, film has become a niche hobby for enthusiasts rather than a daily necessity. Paper maps. Paper maps were once the primary way to navigate unfamiliar places. People kept them in their cars or backpacks, unfolding them to plot out routes. With GPS and digital maps on our phones, paper maps have rarely been used. They've become obsolete as technology provides real-time directions, turning those big foldable sheets into collectibles or emergency backups. Invading Europe. Historically, invading Europe was a strategic military goal for many empires. However, in the modern era, with the rise of international cooperation and diplomacy, the concept of such invasions has become obsolete. The world has shifted towards peaceful resolutions and economic alliances.
For that alone, Captain, we should strangle them all. As expected, the ideological department of the Soviet Army,
making the idea of territorial invasions more of a history lesson than a current event. Evening news and newspapers. Evening news and newspapers were once the main source of information for most people. Families gathered around the TV to watch the news or read the daily paper. Now, with 24/7 news channels, social media, and online articles, these traditional sources are less central. They've become more of a routine for some, but far from the universal necessity they once were. Walking up to the TV to change the channel. Before remote controls, if you wanted to change the channel, you had to walk up to the TV and turn the dial. With the intervention of remotes, this once common task has become obsolete. Now we can flip through channels from the comfort of the couch, making the act of physically changing the channel a distant memory. Celestial navigation. Celestial navigation was once the only way to navigate across open seas. Sailors used the stars to chart their course. With the advent of GPS, this skill has become nearly obsolete. Modern navigation technology has made it easy to find your way without ever looking up at the sky, leaving celestial navigation as a specialized skill for enthusiasts and historians. Phone booth. Phone booths were once found on every street corner, essential for making calls away from home. Now, with cell phones in nearly everyone's pocket, phone booths are nearly extinct. They've become obsolete as mobile technology.
So you didn't pick up, and it gave you back your money. Okay, excellent. Okay, now make the real call.
Has made communication instant and portable, leaving the iconic booths as relics of a bygone era. Party lines. Party lines were shared phone lines where multiple households could listen in on calls. People had to use codes or tricks to avoid eavesdroppers. With the advent of private phone lines and now mobile phones, party lines became obsolete. The idea of sharing a line with neighbors is now a quirky part of telecommunication history. Gregg and Pitman. Gregg and Pitman's shorthand were once essential for secretaries and reporters to quickly jot down notes. But with today's voice recorders and keyboards, shorthand has become nearly forgotten. Some people can still read those squiggly notes, but it's more of a rare skill now. Shorthand became obsolete as technology made writing and recording faster and easier, leaving it behind as a part of history, crucial, vital, indispensable, necessary, fundamental, critical, pivotal, key, requisite, and important. Knocker-ups. Before alarm clocks, people called knocker-ups would wake others by knocking on their windows with long sticks. This was especially common in industrial towns. With the invention of reliable alarm clocks and later smartphones, knocker-ups became obsolete. The need for a human alarm was replaced by machines, making this old practice a curious footnote in history.
In the beginning, the way that knocker-ups would wake their customers is that they would simply go to their homes and ring the doorbell or knock on their windows and doors.
Landlines. Landline phones were once the main way people communicated at home. Nearly every household had one. With the rise of mobile phones, landlines are becoming less common though. They've become obsolete for many as mobile phones have provided more flexibility and features, turning landlines into a backup option or something only the older generation clings to. Pocket watches. Pocket watches were once a symbol of sophistication and the primary way to tell time. People carried them everywhere, pulling them out to check the hour. With the advent of wristwatches and later smartphones, pocket watches became obsolete. They're now more of a collector's item or fashion statement than a practical tool for keeping time. The bathroom for whites and non-whites. Segregated bathrooms were once a grim reality in many parts of the world, reflecting deep racial divisions. Thankfully, such practices have become obsolete as society moved towards equality and civil rights advanced. The idea of segregated bathrooms is now a stark reminder of a discriminatory past that we've worked hard to overcome. Stovetop toasters. Stovetop toasters were once a common way to make toast by placing bread on a metal frame over a burner. With the invention of electric toasters, which were more convenient and efficient, stovetop toasters became obsolete. They're now more of a novelty item found in antique shops rather than modern kitchens.
It goes very quickly. I suggest you use a pair of tongs or a fork to move your bread around.
Those old-timey phones where you hold... Well, these phones, often seen in old movies, required you to hold a separate earpiece and speak into a mounted mouthpiece. With the evolution of phone design, these cumbersome devices became obsolete. Today, they're mostly found in museums or as decorative pieces, representing a bygone era of communication. Telephone exchange operators. Telephone exchange operators were once vital for connecting calls. You'd pick up the phone and they'd manually connect you to your desired number. As automated systems took over, these operators became obsolete. The job, once vital, has now faded into history, replaced by instant, automated connections. Reason, critical thinking, and logic, apparently. This is more reflective than practical, noticing a decline on these values in modern discourse. While not a physical item, the sentiment reflects concerns that these skills may become less common or valued in today's fast-paced...
Somewhat different from the North in that they were more blatant, more overt, and more threatening.
media-driven world. The importance of reason, critical thinking, and logic remains, even if they sometimes feel overshadowed by emotion and sensationalism. Unbiased sources of news. Unbiased news sources were once the standard, with journalists striving to present facts without personal or corporate influence. Today, many feel that such sources are becoming rare, with media often perceived as biased or agenda-driven. The idea of truly neutral news may feel obsolete, but the pursuit of unbiased reporting continues to be a goal worth striving for. Rationing in Britain. Rationing in Britain was a necessity during and after World War II, ensuring that everyone had access to essential goods. As the economy recovered and global trade resumed, rationing became obsolete. Today, it's remembered as a tough but necessary measure during a time of hardship, a historical chapter that has thankfully closed. Liberal democracy. Liberal democracy, which emphasizes individual freedoms, rule of law, and fair elections, is a political system that has faced challenges in recent years. While not obsolete, the principles of liberal democracy are being tested by rising authoritarianism and political polarization. The concept remains crucial, but its implementation and stability are increasingly questioned in today's world. Dewey Decimal System. The Dewey Decimal System and card catalogs were once the backbone of library organizations. Students and researchers would spend hours sifting through index cards.
I see low prices of about $125, but I also see where it's going for something like $300. It depends on who's selling it and who's buying it.
To find sources for term papers. Digital cards and search engines have made this system largely obsolete, turning those wooden drawers of cards into nostalgic relics of a more manual era of research. Blueprint machines. Blueprint machines were once the standard for producing technical drawings with their characteristic blue background. Today, oversized printers produce these designs on standard white paper, making blueprint machines obsolete. While the aesthetic of the original blueprints is missed by some, the smell of ammonia and the cumbersome process are not. Landlines. Landlines, once used for phone communication, have found a niche use in providing DSL internet. However, as fiber optics and other high-speed options expand, even this use is becoming obsolete. Landlines are slowly fading, replaced by faster, more reliable technology that doesn't rely on aging infrastructure. A competent drafter. Competent drafters were once indispensable for creating precise mechanical and engineering plans by hand. Today, computer-aided design, or CAD software, has largely taken over, making the need for manual drafting skills obsolete. The role of the drafter has evolved, with technology handing out much of the heavy lifting, allowing for more complex and accurate designs. The ice deliveries. In the 1960s, before refrigerators became common in every home,
of course, people were harvesting ice from lakes and ponds before the 19th century, but it hadn't been done on an industrial scale before.
People relied on ice deliveries to keep their food cold. Here's how it worked. Homes had ice boxes, which were like early refrigerators, but without any built-in cooling system. Instead of plugging them in, you'd place a big block of ice inside to keep everything cool. Ice delivery was a regular service, just like milk or newspaper deliveries. An ice cream man would come by your house regularly, often several times a week, and he'd carry a heavy block of ice, usually wrapped in a burlap sack over his shoulder, and carefully place it in your ice box. The ice would slowly melt over time, keeping your milk, butter, and other perishables cold for a few days. The iceman was a familiar and friendly face in many neighborhoods, and people depended on him to keep their food from spoiling, especially in the summer. Kids loved watching the iceman work, sometimes even getting a small piece of ice as a treat. But as electric refrigerators became more affordable and widespread, the need for regular ice deliveries faded. By the end of the 1960s, most homes had refrigerators, making the daily visit for the iceman a thing of the past. Yellow Pages. In the 1960s, the Yellow Pages were a vital resource for households and businesses, serving as the go-to directory for finding local services, businesses, and professionals. Nearly every home had a copy, often prominently placed near the telephone for easy access. The directory was organized by categories.
Townsend. Hello, you know the Hornby double-O model railway?
Making it simple to locate anything from plumbers and electricians to restaurants and retail stores. The Yellow Pages were an essential tool for businesses as well, offering a primary means of advertising to the local community. Companies paid for listings and ads, with larger, more prominent ads providing greater visibility. For many small and medium-sized businesses, being listed in the Yellow Pages was crucial for attracting customers, as it was one of the few ways to reach a wide audience in the pre-internet days. In addition to its utility, the Yellow Pages were a symbol of connectivity in the 1960s, reflecting a time when information was not instantly accessible. The thick yellow book represented a bridge between consumers and services, helping to navigate daily life in an era before digital service engines. The arrival of the Yellow Pages each year was an anticipated event, marking it as an indispensable part of the household. Self-respect. This point appears to reflect a social commentary on changing behaviors, particularly online. The idea is that self-respect is becoming less common as people engage in increasingly bizarre or attention-seeking behavior on the internet. While not a tangible item, this reflects concerns about the impact of modern culture and social media on personal dignity. Social interaction. Social interaction used to be a daily necessity, with face-to-face conversations as the primary form of communication. With the rise of digital communication and social media,
Charlie's having a difficult weekend. He's going through a crisis. How does he look like he's holding up?
Oh, he looks fine to me.
Traditional social interaction is seen as diminishing. While not obsolete, it has been transformed, leading to concerns that we are losing the depth and quality of in-person connections. Card catalogs. Card catalogs were once crucial for organizing and accessing information in libraries. Rows of drawers filled with index cards guided users to the books they needed. Today, digital databases have made card catalogs obsolete, turning these once crucial tools into historical artifacts, often repurposed or displayed as vintage decor. An electoral college. In the 1960s, the Electoral College remained a pivotal component of the United States presidential election process, continuing a tradition established by the Constitution in 1787. The system was designed to balance the influence of populous and less populous states, ensuring that presidential candidates needed to appeal to a broad coalition of voters across the country. Each state was allowed a number of electors equal to its number of senators and representatives in Congress, which meant that smaller states still had a significant say in the outcome of the election. The 1960s were a crazy decade for American politics, marked by significant civil rights movements, the Cold War, and increasing political polarization. The Electoral College came under scrutiny during this period, particularly after the 1960 election between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon.
It's the prospective candidates for president who might be a good choice. And if you allow the people to choose the big shots.
Kennedy won the presidency by a slim margin in the popular vote, but secured a more decisive victory in the Electoral College, highlighting the potential disconnect between the popular will and the final electoral outcome. Critics argued that the system could undermine democratic principles by potentially electing a candidate who did not win the popular vote. Despite these concerns, the Electoral College continued to function as the mechanism for electing U.S. presidents, its complexities reflecting the challenges of governing a diverse and federated nation. Iron lungs. Iron lungs were life-saving devices for polio patients who couldn't breathe on their own. These large machines encased the patient's body and helped them breathe. With the development of modern ventilators and the near eradication of polio, iron lungs have become obsolete. Today, they serve as a reminder of the medical challenges of the past and the progress made in healthcare. Smallpox shot. In the 1960s, the smallpox vaccine was a routine part of childhood immunization programs worldwide. The vaccine, administered under a bifurcated needle, left a distinctive circular scar on the upper arm, which was a common sight among those vaccinated during this era. The vaccine was crucial in the global fight against smallpox, a highly contagious and deadly disease. By the 1960s, and vaccination efforts, particularly under the World Health Organization's or WHO's intensified campaign,
I know a lot of people would like to get me in a position like this. Squeeze, huh?
smallpox was significantly reduced. These efforts eventually led to the eradication of smallpox in 1980, marking a historic triumph in public health care. Poop knife. The poop knife is a humorous term used to describe a tool some families kept in the bathroom to help break up large bowel movements, particularly in older homes with less advanced plumbing systems. While the idea may seem unusual today, in the 1960s, plumbing in many homes, especially those with older infrastructure, was not as efficient as it is now. In homes with frequent clogs or weaker flush systems, a designated poop knife might have been kept discreetly in the bathroom as a practical solution to prevent plumbing issues, reflecting the everyday realities of mid-20th century home life. Pay toilets. In the 1960s, pay toilets were a common feature in public spaces across the United States and many other countries. Typically found in bus stations, train depots, and public restrooms, they required users to deposit a coin, usually a dime or a quarter, to unlock the stall door. These toilets were introduced as a way to maintain cleanliness and deter vandalism, but they sparked significant controversy. Many viewed them as an unfair burden, particularly on women who needed to pay to use a stall while men often had free access to urinals. This led to growing opposition and eventually the removal of pay toilets in many places by the late 1970s.
Dry my hand. I don't want to touch anything. There's a complimentary comb, some shoes, empty bottle of Heineken.
Over time, these have largely disappeared, especially in the United States, as public sentiment shifted towards free access to basic facilities. Today, pay toilets are rare, having become obsolete as the concept of paying to use the bathroom fell out of favor. Common sense. It might not be obsolete, but common sense is becoming less common, particularly in today's complex and fast-paced world. While not a tangible item, the sentiment reflects concerns that practical judgment and straightforward thinking are being overshadowed by more convoluted or irrational behavior in society. Punch cards. In the early days of computing, data was entered onto punch cards by clerks, and these cards were then fed into computers. This method was prone to errors and slow. With the advent of digital storage and more user-friendly interfaces, punch cards and the clerks who managed them became obsolete. The process of data entry has evolved, becoming faster, more reliable, and far less manual. Microfilm readers. In the 1960s, microfilm readers were like big, special magnifying machines that helped people look at the tiny pictures or important papers stored on film strips. Imagine having a huge library of books or newspapers, but instead of keeping all that paper, they took tiny photos of each page and put them on these film strips to save space. To read them,
a medical microfilm system might provide immediate access to specific patient information or unusual medical situations that might arise.
People would load the film into a microfilm reader, which would shine a light through the film and make the tiny pictures big enough to see on screen. It was like looking at a photo album, But instead of flipping pages, you had to scroll through the film manually, which could be slow and tricky. These machines were super helpful for researchers and librarians because they could store lots of information without needing a ton of space. But as computers and digital storage became popular, these microfilm readers started to fade away because it became easier to store and find documents digitally. Microfilm readers were widely used in libraries and offices to view and store documents. While still in use in some archives, they have largely been replaced by digital storage and retrieval systems. The clunky machines and the need to physically handle film have made microfilm readers mostly obsolete, with digital scanning providing a more convenient solution. Muscle-operated hand-crank brace drills. Hand-crank brace drills were once essential tools for woodworkers and craftsmen, allowing them to drill holes with manual power. Today, electric drills have made these muscle-powered tools largely obsolete. While some artisans still use them for precision work, they have mostly been replaced by more efficient, powered tools in modern workshops. The 1960s were a time of innovation and change, but many everyday essentials from that era have since faded into history. Items like encyclopedias, rotary phones, and ice deliveries were once indispensable, but have been replaced by modern technologies and conveniences. As we move forward, these relics of the past remind us of how quickly the world evolves. They serve as nostalgic glimpses into a different time, illustrating how societal needs and technological advancements continually reshape our lives, leaving behind what was once essential but is now obsolete.